Book 101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that are read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is a podcast host like me, no other than Miss Jennifer Gligoric.
Hey, I'm excited to be here today.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Jennifer. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Well, my name is Jennifer Gligoric, or Gligoric, you can say it either way. And my podcast is the Super Clinic Project podcast. So we mostly talk to entrepreneurs, specifically clinic owners, so healthcare clinic owners, dentists, chiropractors, a lot of chiropractors, functional medicine and stuff like that. I've got about 25 years as crisis interventionist for businesses. So my job would be to go into businesses when everything's going what they consider wrong and to fix them, to get them back on track. And so that's what I do is I help entrepreneurs and I do a lot of things like that. I'm also the Minister of Equity and Resources for the nation of Iscardia, which is the world's first digital nation. We have unofficial UN observer status, and we just sent our national assets to the moon on March 2nd. And it was a really big deal for Iscardians all over the world. And now when I look up on the moon, I know that my picture and my bio and my information is up there, pressed between this very special type of glass that's going to last for about 1 billion years. So a lot of fun things are happening right now.
Congratulations, Miss Jennifer. Congratulations, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Super Clinic Podcast. What are your, or Super Clinic Project Podcast? What are your short term and long term goals?
Well, my short term goals are to help as many entrepreneurs as I can realize their dreams. And that's why the books I brought today are Moved My Cheese from Spencer Johnson and The Dream Giver from Bruce Wilkinson, because those have been instrumental in my life. I'm an entrepreneur as well. I have my own companies and also helping other entrepreneurs realize their goals, but doing it in an ethical way. So ethical entrepreneurship is a pretty big part of my life. It's basically a guiding philosophy. If we're going to do something, do it ethically. I think right now we see a lot of corporations that are not very ethical. They don't think about people and the planet and, our journey and how we relate to each other or our resources. And so anytime small business, which they have the power to change the world, we can get more small business owners competing and doing well, then we can change this course that we have. And I really just feel strongly about that. We can change the world in much more positive ways.
What moment made Who Moved My Cheese resonate beyond a simple parable, and how did they frame your view of resistance to change?
Well, the reason I like both of these books is because they're not huge novels and they're not so weighty that I'm just spending a lot of time thinking, what did that even mean? They're easy, quote unquote, easy reads, but every sentence is packed full of a lot of aha moments. So, particularly in Who Moved My Cheese, it's a parable about mice. And you're like, how does that relate to business? Well, it's how these mice are given resources and how each of these mice react to getting resources, then having the resources leave, having struggle and fear, and how they react to it. And so each mice represents a type of personality. Some we will recognize ourselves in these mice and recognize others, and the cheese and the maze that they're in really is about this life struggles. And so particularly, noticing trends before they happen, which if you're an entrepreneur, you can't live in the present. You have to always be future thinking. You've got to be thinking, you've got to be listening to the people you serve, especially if you're in a service organization, and what they want, what they're looking for. And you've got to be able to be predictive in certain ways. So this little parable about this cheese and who moved my cheese really talks about how the world changes. Change is inevitable, and we must react to that change in ways that are positive. But unfortunately, life has risk. There are bad risks, and then there are other risks we just have to take because that's the next step for us to evolve and to find our next big cheese pile, which is, if we just stay until everything goes badly, then we die, right? And, we talk about that in business, grow or die. If you're a stagnant business, if you haven't invested in yourself, invested in your staff, and invested in anything else, then you're not going to be moving forward for very long. So that's this parable talks about that, and that we have to move forward. But particularly to answer your question, you said, what statement? There is one statement in there that I have used my entire life since the first time I read this book, which was quite long ago. I don't want to age myself, but I'm not a
Yes.
spring chicken. But the what it stated was, what would you do if you were not afraid? And that blew me away because I didn't realize how many of my decisions have been made on fear rather than, fear of, well, what if, I can't leave this job because what if I don't get this other job, or I can't do this, or what if this other place isn't as good, or am I really going to strike out on my own in business? What if it fails? I what ifed myself into a lot of just nothingness, right? Whereas I needed to take risk. And thankfully, I've learned that pretty early on. I've taken risks that did not pan out, risks on people that I wanted to work with or hire, and I'll take a risk, and it was a bad risk. I ended up having to fire them, or break up with them, or that business didn't work. But did I learn something valuable? Every single time I learned something that I could go back and go, okay, now I know never to do that again. But the risk was always worth it. I never took really dumb risks, I would say, not too stupid of risks, but because there are some that are, if you're just going to jump off a cliff and you have no knowledge of cliff diving, that would be a dumb risk, right? I'm thinking about things like that, right?
Yes.
But just what would I do if I weren't afraid? And then in working with business owners and people who run their own business, so many of them make all their decisions on fear. They won't grow when they need to. All of a sudden they start doing well. And instead of taking that money and reinvesting it, expanding, hiring, more and better staff, they just stay. And then they'll take that money and spend all that money. And then because they did not grow, they ended up shooting that business in the foot, and they end up folding. And then they try to tell themselves, oh, I'm so glad. If I would have expanded and done that, then it would have been even worse. When the opposite is true, you'd still be in business. You'd have better staff. You would have been able to give raises to the staff that have been loyal to you. Everything good happens when you lean into when you're doing well in prosperity.
How did Wilkinson's allegory validate or challenge your own journey from ordinary to pursuing big dream?
Everything about that is so simplistic. You have this guy or girl named Ordinary, and they live in the land of familiar, and they don't want to leave, but they decide they have a big dream. And there's lots of people to help them that are like, you can't go outside of familiar. No one's even been there. Like, it's terrible. It's bad, but I want to, I need to. And what was interesting about it is every time they move past their comfort zone, sometimes good things happen and sometimes bad things happen. But it's very much like Who Moved My Cheese, in that they learned good lessons. What I loved about The Dream Giver, though, is, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but this book has been out there for like 30, 40 years. So if you haven't read it, it's not my fault, but
Yes.
so I'm not going to spoil it. But once he hit what he thought was the dream, he didn't stop. He realized he needed bigger dreams. So that one huge, big dream goal had finally, through a lot of tribulations and things, but then it's not over. So unless you're consistently making goals to move towards those goals and dreaming bigger and better dreams, you're not hitting your potential. And striving for your potential in life is the whole goal of life. Is who were you meant to be by God, right? Or the universe, or however you feel. But you have unlimited, untapped potential for you. And it's your birthright. It's your given right to work as hard as you can to figure out what that is. Maybe you're going to be the best artist on the planet. Maybe you're going to be a great accountant and you're going to help people, you know, take their resources that they have and do a really good job with those resources so they can live great lives and you'll live a good life. No matter who you are, everyone has a purpose. And so I think that it's very important for the dream giver that when they hit the goal, he made another goal. And then there's another goal, because our potential is limitless as long as we keep on moving towards our potential.
Miss Jennifer, where do these two philosophies, adapting to change, cheese, and pursuing purpose, dream giver, intersect with your work?
Well, with everything. So when I grew up in a really good family. You'd think I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth, but the addiction and some really bad things happened inside of my family. And I was homeless when I was a teenager. And so I went to college being homeless. I lived in and out of shelters because at the time you could only stay in a shelter for a couple of weeks and then you'd have to be on your own. So I would just crash with people. Sometimes I had a little tent that I had there for a while. And sometimes I just lived like literally on the street. And I still made it from that because I still had goals. And I had not read these books then. I didn't know that these books were even out there. But later on, once I got out of that, I realized that the principles in the books I was unknowingly utilizing. I stayed positive. I stayed away from truly negative things. And anyone knows when you're an unhoused young girl, there's really bad predators that are out there. And as long as you adopt certain things, which these books also teach you, your attitude, how you relate with others, those kind of keep the predators at bay because they think to themselves, hmm, there's something about her. Maybe she's got people. Maybe somebody would come looking for her or defend her. And they kind of stay away. They look for people who are broken, right? And so in these books, I noticed how some of those things I was doing unconsciously. I didn't know to do them. So that's why it's so important when you read books like this later, because if you don't know, now you know and you can protect yourself. So there's ways to protect yourself as you go through the journey. There's also this continuously moving forward. When I think about it on my young career, until my family ended up getting healthy, and now I have you'd if you saw them now, you'd be like, you would have no idea any of that would ever happen because people heal and people get better. And I got better. I had to go through my own healing journey from all of that. But it's the continually striving to figure out what my purpose is and what my potential is and who you are as a person. And so one of the most important things with both of these books and how they intersect is if you are in business and it's just not working, you need to ask yourself, when I die, what is my funeral going to look like? When I work one-on-one with a client, because that's what I do. I do that, and I have an accelerator program and all this other stuff through Brand Lab. But what's one of the things that I do or we do together as a group is to think about your funeral and what your legacy really is. And the people who are unhappy with their lives or unhappy in their business, when they talk about their funeral and their legacy, and then they think about what they're doing today, they're two totally separate places because they got in it to make money. Usually I just needed to pay the bills and my parents wanted me to do this and this is what I'm doing, but nothing about their actual legacy and who they are as a person is being fulfilled. The people who are pretty happy, they think they got a good beat on things, are the people who are like, yeah, I'm kind of on the path. I think I could be more on the path. I need some help because there's some bricks that I don't even know how to even ask the questions for that to get me where I want to go. And that's why I'm getting help. But they feel at least they're on the path. And so I think that when you start asking yourself these questions, what would I do if I were not afraid? What is my big, big goal? And am I working towards that big goal? Those questions aren't just these woohoo, it feels really good, These are real questions that business owners have to ask themselves, but really anyone. If you're at work or if you're, running a business, you want to start a business, whatever, you have to ask yourself that. And it's got to be more than, well, I just need some money to pay my bills. That's survival. How you become successful is when you get out of survival and you work towards something that you really, really want.
Interesting indeed, Miss Jennifer. How do you guide entrepreneurs through the lonely, uncertain middle phase of their big dream?
Well, that's when being at your goal is the most important and learning that every day you just have to take a positive step towards it. So if you have already defined your big goal, then you can reverse engineer that goal. So let's say you need to think about your goal in terms of how much you need for that goal. Real estate, where are you going to be in? And if it's real estate in let's say it's a clinic, am I going to be in the same office or do I want to expand? Do I want to build my own building? Then how many staff am I going to need to help me? Or if it's personal, how many people am I going to need around me? What kind of people are those? Do I need any education or certification for that? What do I want my purpose to actually be? So once you define those things out in those terms, then you can say, okay, to get there in 10 years, where do I need to be in 5 years? And if I'm not there in 5 years, I won't be able to hit this in 10 years. And you can logically break that down. Then you can logically break it down to 4, 3, 2, and 1. And then once you do that, you can break that down into quarters. And then you can know, am I working towards that goal at all times? So it's just an exercise that takes you, if you don't know what you want at all, maybe it's a couple of days, but if you kind of know what you want, it just take a couple of hours. And then suddenly, people are like, I wish I had a book that would just tell me. Well, you've got it. You've got your goal. You've got your dream. All you have to do is just break it apart and then it'll tell you what to do. And if you don't know, get a coach or get someone to help you fill out the holes or gaps if you don't know how to get from one place or the other. So I would tell them, if you're ever stuck, go back to your big dream and do that again, that process.
Indeed, Miss Jennifer, indeed. How do both books transform how you coach clients through setbacks?
Well, they're foundational books because setbacks are usually caused because of something happened and then we had a big fear response to it and we couldn't move through it. So we need to unpack what the fear is, of what stopped them from continuing to move forward. you know uh, I'm afraid if I do this, I won't have any more time with my family, and I really want to spend time with my kids. Well, that's a challenge. You're right. You will have to spend this time, but why do you have to do that? What if you were able to even get a loan to hire someone else to help you with that? And then now you've doubled your capacity. Sometimes no matter what the financial constraint is or what the thing is, there is a challenge in there and it can be solved. So by using these two books and the what I've figured out in them, that's how we work through these issues. So I would say I use it every day and in two different ways, constantly putting people back to their big dream, because that's the reason they're here on the planet. That, I want to value that in them as a human being and that soul who is on this journey to help them get to the biggest, best version of themselves that they can possibly be, because that's what they're here for. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help people do that, right? And so that is a lot about the dream giver, and the Who Moved My Cheese is helping them through challenges. I was challenged very young in life with no skills, and I've had many challenges throughout my life. But because of my mindset and because of some of these skills that I've learned, particularly in these two books, I've managed to not lose it all, not get addicted or fall into some traps that people can fall into if they don't have any of the right coping mechanisms to get them through terrible things that happen, because life has bad things. Some, you love someone and they betray you. That's hard to get through that. Some people can't, but that we do have tools to get anyone through it to the next level.
Miss Jennifer, very well said. Beautifully articulated. Do you use Johnson's characters, Neve, Scurry, Ham, and Ho, as a client assessment tool?
Well, I wouldn't say a client assessment tool, but I do think about the limiting beliefs that the mice had, and how how I can steer them to the better beliefs, to get them to go through their own maze, to find it to their next big pile of cheese, so that they can get to their next level and level up.
Yes, indeed, Miss Jennifer. Before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and of course, my book 101 review in its fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast, Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Miss Jennifer, how, or let's say, how has blending these philosophies allow you to push clients farther than traditional methods?
Well, I would say that I've had tremendous success with my clinic owners. So I can take them through a 4-month accelerator, and I 2 to 10x their business in that time. When I did this alone, I I mean, I still got good results, but not as good results as when I used these methods. When I finally realized how absolutely married the personal life goal was with the business goal, and how intrinsic it was, that is when it all was my personal big aha moment. I have to help the people, and then the business stuff just all falls in line in many ways.
Miss Jennifer, thank you so much again for sharing your podcast to the world, as well as your wisdom and knowledge. Can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast as well as your advocacy?
Yes, if you go to superclinicproject.com, you'll be able to find me. If you click on my picture, it'll take you to the fact page, and then you can even book a call with me and get a lot of freebies. So get those freebies.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Jennifer, because if you support her, more and more and more empowering episodes of the podcast itself, and of course, more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Miss Jennifer, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and have a great week.
More to come, people. See you soon.